The garage smelled like motor oil and memories. Jack Morrison's hands, weathered, scarred, still steady at 67, moved across the chrome of his 1978 Harley-Davidson shovelhead with the practiced precision of a man who'd spent a lifetime understanding machines. The kind of understanding that came not from manuals, but from thousands of miles on open roads, from nights spent broken down in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but moonlight and stubbornness to guide the repairs. Outside, Phoenix burned under an April sun that had no mercy for anything living. Inside the small garage tucked away on the western edge of the city, Jack had found something close to peace, the kind of peace a man earns after walking away from the fire. He dipped the cloth into the polish, watched the way the light caught the metal. 32 years. 32 years since he'd worn the patch. 32 years since anyone had called him Iron Wolf. Some men spend their whole lives running from who they were. Jack had spent 3 decades walking slowly, deliberately in the opposite direction. The phone shattered the silence like glass breaking in an empty church. Jack's hand stopped mid-motion. He didn't move for 3 full seconds, just stared at the device vibrating against the workbench. The number on the screen read, Mercy General Hospital Emergency. His throat went dry. There are moments in a man's life when time fractures, when the world splits into before and after, and you can feel the crack forming even before you know what's broken. Jack picked up the phone. Mr. Morrison. A woman's voice, professional but strained. This is Mercy General Hospital. Your mother, Martha Morrison, was brought in 20 minutes ago. You're listed as her emergency contact. The wrench slipped from Jack's other hand. The metallic clang as it hit the concrete floor seemed to come from very far away. What happened? Sir, she was assaulted. A robbery. She's stable, but... Jack didn't hear the rest. The phone was already falling away from his ear as he moved toward the Harley. His hands found the helmet without conscious thought. Muscle memory, the kind that never dies no matter how many years you bury it. The engine roared to life with a sound like thunder remembering its purpose. Phoenix traffic blurred past. Red lights became suggestions. The wind against his face felt like being dragged backward through time, and for the first time in 32 years, Jack Morrison didn't fight it. The emergency room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Jack pushed through the automatic doors, still wearing his work clothes denim shirt dark with sweat, hands stained with grease he hadn't bothered to clean. A nurse started to intercept him, saw something in his face and stepped aside. Martha Morrison, he said. Not a question, a demand. The nurse pointed. Room 7, doctor. Patterson is with her. The hallway stretched forever. His boots made heavy sounds against the linoleum. Through the small window in the door, Jack saw his mother, 84 years old, the woman who had raised him alone after his father died, the woman who had cried when he came home at 25 with a Hells Angels patch on his back, the woman who had nearly died in a car accident at 52 because she'd been too distracted worrying about her son to notice the red light. Now she lay motionless, head, bandaged face, pale as old paper, surrounded by machines that beeped out the fragile rhythm of her life. A man in a white coat looked up as Jack entered. Young, maybe 40, the kind of doctor who'd seen enough to know when to skip the pleasantries. Mr. Morrison, I'm Dr. Patterson. He gestured to the chair beside the bed. Your mother suffered significant trauma, multiple contusions, a fractured hip, and a concussion. At her age, these injuries are, will she live, doctor? Patterson met his eyes, respected the directness. Yes, but recovery will be long, painful. Jack moved to the bedside. His mother's hand lay on top of the white sheet so small it seemed impossible it had ever held his when he was young, ever slapped sense into him when he needed it, ever touched his face with such tenderness it made him believe he could be better than he was. He took that hand now, carefully, like holding something made of ancient glass. What happened? His voice came out rougher than he intended. Dr. Patterson consulted his tablet. According to witnesses, 3 young men approached her on Grant Street around 2:45 p.m. She was carrying groceries. They grabbed her purse. When she resisted, one of them pushed her. Hard. She went down on the sidewalk. He paused. There's a witness who called 911 immediately. A woman named Harriet Sullivan. She owns the flower shop on the corner. Jack filed the name away. The men who did this fled east, toward the Mission District. Dr. Patterson's expression shifted slightly. Professional detachment giving way to something more human. Anger, maybe. Mr. Morrison, your mother kept saying something before the sedation took full effect. She was quite distressed about it. What did she say? She kept repeating, don't let them open it. Don't let them open it. We assumed she meant her purse, but He trailed off, uncomfortable with the intensity in Jack's eyes. Jack looked down at his mother. Even unconscious, there was tension in her face. Fear, the kind that doesn't come from physical pain. "Can I have a moment with her?" Jack asked. Dr. Patterson nodded. "Of course. I'll be just outside if you need anything." The door clicked shut with a sound like a cell locking. Jack pulled the chair closer. The years had carved deep lines into his mother's face, but he could still see her as she'd been. Younger, stronger. Standing in the doorway of their small house, arms crossed, waiting for him to come home from wherever the hell he'd been all night. He remembered the disappointment in her eyes, the way it cut deeper than any punch he'd ever taken. "Mom," he whispered. Just that one word. It cracked in the middle like something breaking. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Jack leaned closer. "I'm here. You're safe. I'm going to fix this." For a long moment, nothing. Just the steady beep of the heart monitor and the whisper of the ventilation system. Then Martha's eyes opened, just barely. Unfocused, but searching. "Jack?" Her voice was less than a whisper, more like the memory of breath. "I'm here, Mom." Her hand tightened on his with surprising strength. Her eyes found his face and something like panic flickered there. "The locket," she managed. Each word cost her. "Don't let them open the locket." "What locket, Mom? What are you talking about?" But her eyes were already closing again. The effort of those few words had drained what little consciousness the sedation hadn't claimed. Jack stayed there for another hour, holding her hand, watching her breathe, memorizing the rhythm of the machines that were keeping her tethered to this world. When he finally left, he had a single destination in mind. The apartment building where his mother lived stood in an older part of Phoenix, the kind of neighborhood that had seen better decades in worse economies. Jack had offered to move her somewhere nicer 100 times. She'd refused every one. "I've lived here for 40 years, she'd told him the last time he'd brought it up. "I'll die here too, and that's fine by me." He took the stairs to the second floor, two at a time, despite his age. The key was where it always was on his keyring, right next to the one for his garage. Insurance, she'd called it. Just in case something happens. Something had happened. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Coffee cup in the sink, the crossword puzzle on the table half finished in her careful handwriting. The TV remote placed precisely on the arm of her favorite chair. Jack stood in the center of the living room and felt the weight of absence. This was the place where he'd grown up, where his father had taught him to tie his shoes, where his mother had waited up night after night during those years when he was trying to become someone she didn't recognize, where he'd promised 32 years ago that he would be better. He moved through the apartment with purpose now. The locket. She'd been desperate for him to protect it. Desperate enough to fight through sedation and pain to warn him. The bedroom was small, neat, the bed made with military precision. His mother had been a Navy nurse in her youth, and some habits never died. Jack opened the dresser drawers one by one. Clothes folded with mathematical exactness. Nothing unusual, nothing hidden, until the bottom drawer. It stuck slightly when he pulled. He had to jiggle it, and when it finally opened, he saw why. A metal box, the kind designed to be fireproof, waterproof, timeproof, plain gray, no markings, wedged into the back corner beneath layers of old sweaters that smelled faintly of mothballs and his mother's perfume. Jack lifted it out, heavy, locked. He didn't need to search for the key. He knew where it would be, the same place she'd hidden everything important when he was growing up. Behind the loose tile in the bathroom, third from the left, second row from the bottom. His fingers found the small brass key on the first try. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed far too loud in the silent apartment. Inside, a gold locket on a delicate chain, photographs, a few old letters tied with string, and one envelope, yellowed with age. His name written on the front in his father's handwriting. Jack Morrison. His hands shook as he picked it up. He hadn't seen his father's handwriting in 32 years. Richard Morrison had died in 1992, 2 months after Martha's car accident. 2 months after Jack had promised to leave the Hells Angels. 2 months after he'd tried to become the son his father had always hoped for. Too late, as it turned out. His father's heart had given out before Jack could prove the promise was real. Jack opened the envelope, inside 3 pages, covered in his father's careful script. The handwriting of a man who'd worked with his hands all his life, but still believed words mattered. The date at the top, November 1992. Jack, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and something has happened to make your mother give you this letter. I've asked her to keep it safe, to only share it if the past comes calling. I hoped it never would. But hope is a fragile thing, son, and the past has long teeth. There are things I never told you, things I was ashamed of, things I thought I could bury deep enough that they'd never see light again. I was wrong. The locket your mother wears, the one I gave her on our 5th anniversary in 1962. It's not just a piece of jewelry. Inside it, there's more than photographs. There's a microfilm. Small. Easy to miss if you don't know to look for it. Your Uncle Franklin put it there. You never met him. He died in 1972 when you were 15. We told you it was a motorcycle accident. We lied. Franklin was murdered. He was a good man, Jack. Better than me. He saw corruption in the Arizona government, high-level people working with criminal organizations, moving weapons, taking bribes. This was during the early 70s when everything was chaos and nobody was watching the right things. Franklin gathered evidence, names, dates, photographs, bank records. He was going to turn it all over to the FBI. He believed in the system, believed justice would win. He was wrong about that too. The people he was investigating found out. They came for him. Made it look like an accident. A drunk biker who lost control on a desert highway? Case closed. No investigation. But Franklin was smart. He'd hidden the evidence. He gave me the microfilm the week before he died. Told me if anything happened to him, I should finish what he started. I should be the one to make sure those men paid for their crimes. I couldn't do it, Jack. They came to me 3 days after Franklin's funeral. 3 men in suits. They knew I had the evidence. They told me what would happen if I used it. They told me about your mother, about you. You were just a boy. They were very specific about what they could do to boys. So I made a choice. I hid the microfilm in the locket, gave it to your mother, told her it was just a gift. She never knew what was inside, and I never spoke Franklin's name again. I've lived 30 years with that shame, son. 30 years knowing my brother died for nothing, knowing the men who killed him walked free, knowing I was too weak, too scared to honor his sacrifice. I'm telling you this now because if someone is looking for that locket, it means they know. It means the people whose names are on that microfilm, or their children, their successors, have discovered the evidence still exists. Your mother is in danger. You might be in danger. I'm sorry to leave you with this burden. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to carry it myself. Your Uncle Franklin was the brave one. I was just the brother who survived by keeping quiet. If you're reading this, you have a choice to make. The same choice I faced. You can destroy the evidence, protect your family, live with the weight of knowing evil went unpunished. Or you can finish what Franklin started. I won't tell you which to choose. I gave up the right to guide you the day I chose fear over justice. But I will tell you this, whatever you decide, be braver than your father. I love you, son. I'm proud of the man you became, even if I didn't live long enough to see all of it. Dad Jack read the letter 3 times. Then he set it down carefully on his mother's bed and walked to the bathroom. His reflection in the mirror showed a man he barely recognized. Gray hair, lines carved deep around eyes that had seen too much. A face that had learned hardness and forgotten softness. But underneath it all, still there, that 25-year-old kid who'd thought the Hell's Angels patch made him invincible. The kid who'd broken his mother's heart. The kid who'd disappointed his father so thoroughly that Richard Morrison had died believing his son would never amount to anything. Jack had spent 32 years proving that belief wrong. Now his mother lay in a hospital bed because someone wanted the evidence his father had been too afraid to use. Because the past had come calling, just like Richard Morrison had feared. Jack walked back to the bedroom, picked up the locket, opened it, inside a photograph of his parents, young and smiling. His father's arm around his mother's shoulders. Both of them squinting into sunlight, happy in a way that seemed impossible now. He looked closer. They're barely visible, pressed flat between the photo and the backing, a tiny piece of film. So small you'd never see it unless you knew to look. Jack closed the locket, held it in his palm. Such a small thing to carry so much weight. His phone buzzed. Text message from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Morrison, this is Harriet Sullivan. I own the flower shop on Grant Street. I witnessed what happened to your mother. I have some information you need to hear. Can we meet? Jack stared at the message. Then he typed back, when and where. The response came immediately. My shop. Now if possible. This can't wait. Jack pocketed the locket, picked up the letter, read one line again. Be braver than your father. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the metal box. Then he walked to his mother's closet and opened the door. In the back, pushed far into the shadows, hung something he hadn't seen in 3 decades. The leather jacket, black, heavy, worn soft by years of wind and weather. The Hell's Angels patch on the back skull and wings colors he'd once been willing to die for. Jack pulled it out, ran his fingers over the leather. It still fit, he knew it would. Some things you don't outgrow, you just learn to live without them. He put it on. The weight of it settled across his shoulders like an old debt coming due. In the mirror, he saw the ghost of who he'd been. Iron Wolf, the man who'd made other men afraid, the man who'd lived by rules written in blood and brotherhood, the man he'd walked away from to keep a promise to his dying mother. Jack Morrison looked at his reflection and made a decision. He wasn't going to destroy the evidence. He wasn't going to choose fear over justice. He wasn't going to be his father. He was going to find the men who'd hurt his mother. He was going to get that locket back, and he was going to finish what Uncle Franklin had started 50 years ago, even if it meant becoming Iron Wolf one last time. Harriet Sullivan's flower shop sat on the corner of Grant and 7th Avenue, a small storefront with hand-painted lettering on the window and flowers spilling out of buckets on the sidewalk. Despite the heat, everything looked fresh, loved, tended by hands that cared. Jack parked the Harley across the street. The engine's rumble died, leaving only the desert wind and the distant sound of traffic. He sat for a moment, gathering himself. Through the shop window, he could see an older woman, 70 at least, moving between the displays, with the careful efficiency of someone who'd been doing the same work for decades. When Jack walked in, a bell chimed above the door, gentle, almost musical. Harriet looked up, saw him, 6'2", leather jacket, silver hair, eyes that had forgotten how to be soft, and didn't flinch. "Mr. Morrison?" Not a question. She'd been waiting. "Mrs. Sullivan." Miss, actually. Never married. She set down the flowers she'd been arranging. "I saw what happened to your mother. I'm so sorry." Jack nodded once. Words felt inadequate. "I called you because—" Harriet hesitated. "Because I don't trust what I told the police will be enough. And because your mother is a good woman. She comes in here every week, buys flowers for her apartment, always says the same thing. A house without flowers is a house without hope." Something in Jack's chest tightened. "Tell me what you saw," he said. Harriet moved to the counter, pulled out a pad of paper covered in her own handwriting. "I was putting out the sidewalk display. 2:45 p.m. Your mother was walking west on Grant Street coming from the Safeway. She had 2 bags of groceries." Jack could picture it. The same walk she'd made 1,000 times. The same street she'd lived on for 40 years. 3 young men approached from behind. Harriet continued. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. White, early 20s. One wearing a black hoodie, one in a denim jacket, one in a red cap. The one in the hoodie grabbed her purse. She held on, said something I couldn't hear. What did he do? The one in the denim jacket pushed her, hard, with both hands. She went down backward, hit the pavement. Harriet's voice cracked. The sound. Jack held up a hand. "It's okay. I understand." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what had happened filling the small shop like smoke. "The police asked if I could identify them," Harriet said. "I told them what I remembered, but I didn't tell them everything." Jack's focus sharpened. "What do you mean?" "After they grabbed the purse and ran, I heard one of them say a name. The one in the hoodie, the one who grabbed the purse, he said, 'Webb's gonna pay good for this.'" Webb. The name meant nothing to Jack, but the way Harriet said it carefully, like handling something dangerous, told him it should. "You know that name?" Jack asked. "Everyone in this neighborhood does. Marcus Webb, he's—" Harriet chose her words carefully. "He's a businessman, owns property, restaurants, a few pawn shops, very successful, very connected. Connected to people who make problems disappear." Harriet met his eyes. "Your mother's purse, I saw it when they grabbed it. She was carrying a locket, gold, old, beautiful. I remember because the chain caught the light when they pulled it." Jack's hand moved unconsciously to his jacket pocket, where the locket now rested. "I think," Harriet said slowly, "they were after that specifically. This wasn't random, Mr. Morrison. Your mother was targeted." The flower shop suddenly felt very small, very quiet. Jack pulled out his phone, showed Harriet a photo of the locket. "This one?" Harriet's eyes widened. "Yes, exactly. How did you—" "I found it at her apartment, hidden." Jack put the phone away. "Which means what they took was just her purse. Whatever Webb wanted, he didn't get." "Which means he'll come looking," Harriet said quietly. Jack had already reached the same conclusion, but hearing someone else say it out loud made it real. "Do you know where I can find Webb?" he asked. Harriet wrote an address on a piece of paper. "He owns a bar called El Lobo, east side near the Mission District. That's where," she paused, "that's where people say you can find him most evenings." Jack took the paper. "Thank you, Miss Sullivan, for helping my mother. For this." "Mr. Morrison," Harriet's voice stopped him at the door. "Those three boys, they ran east after it happened, toward the Mission District, toward El Lobo." Jack turned back. "Your mother," Harriet continued, "she's one of the kindest people I've ever known. She doesn't deserve what happened to her." "No," Jack agreed. "She doesn't. What are you going to do?" Jack looked down at his hands, the same hands that had once broken bones and made men bleed. The same hands that had spent 32 years rebuilding engines and trying to rebuild a life. "I'm going to get justice for my mother," he said, "one way or another." He walked out into the Phoenix heat. The Harley waited like a loyal animal. Jack straddled it, felt the familiar weight between his legs, the balance point he'd known since he was young enough to be stupid. The address Harriet had given him was 12 miles east, straight into the heart of the Mission District, straight into territory Jack hadn't set foot in for 3 decades. He started the engine. The sound echoed off the buildings like a declaration of war. As he pulled into traffic, Jack thought about his father's letter, about Uncle Franklin murdered for trying to do the right thing, about his father who'd chosen silence to protect his family, about the choice Jack himself had made 32 years ago when his mother lay in a different hospital bed, when he'd promised to walk away from violence and never look back. He'd kept that promise, but promises he'd learned had limits, and those limits ended when someone hurt the people you loved. The Mission District rose ahead of him like a city within a city. Rougher, harder, the kind of place where questions got you answers or got you killed depending on how you asked. Jack Morrison wasn't worried about which. He'd been Iron Wolf once. He'd made men fear that name. He'd built a reputation in blood and broken teeth, and while 32 years had passed, while his hair had gone gray, and his hands had learned gentler work, some things didn't fade. Some things just waited. The bar called El Lobo sat on a corner lot surrounded by chain-link fence and gravel parking. Half a dozen motorcycles lined up outside like soldiers at attention. Not Harley's Japanese bikes, mostly a few custom jobs. One old Triumph that looked like it had been through a war. Jack didn't park with them. He pulled up across the street, killed the engine, and waited. Inside the bar, through windows tinted dark against the sun, shadows moved. Music thumped. Laughter carried on the hot wind. Jack checked his phone. 3:17 p.m. The attack had happened at 2:45. 32 minutes for the 3 men to run east, find their handler, deliver the news that they'd grabbed the purse but the woman had fought back. If they were going to report to Webb, they'd already be there. Jack was betting they would be, because scared men run to their bosses. And those 3 had to be scared. Assault on an elderly woman in broad daylight witnessed by multiple people, police already involved. That kind of heat made people stupid, made them predictable. Jack got off the bike, stretched. His back popped in 3 places. 67 years of living, 32 of them trying to forget how to be what he was about to become. He crossed the street. The gravel crunched under his boots like breaking bones. The door to El Lobo swung open easy. Inside, dim lighting smell of beer and cigarettes despite the smoking ban, a jukebox playing something heavy and angry. A dozen men scattered around tables. All of them looked up when Jack walked in. All of them saw the leather jacket, the patch, the way Jack moved slow, deliberate, like a man who'd done this before. The music stopped. Someone had pulled the plug on the jukebox. Jack walked to the bar. The bartender, 40 bald arms covered in amateur tattoos, stared at him with the kind of recognition that had nothing to do with memory and everything to do with instinct. "Help you?" the bartender asked. His hand had moved below the counter, where the gun would be. "Whiskey," Jack said. "Neat." The bartender didn't move. "I'm not here for trouble," Jack continued. "I'm here for a conversation." "About what?" "About 3 boys who hurt an old woman this afternoon. About a man named Webb. About justice." The bar had gone cemetery quiet. The bartender's eyes flicked to the back of the room. Jack followed the glance. 3 men sat in a booth near the emergency exit. Young, nervous, one in a black hoodie, one in a denim jacket, one in a red cap. Bingo. Jack turned back to the bartender. "That whiskey," the bartender poured. His hand shook slightly. He set the glass down in front of Jack with more care than necessary. Jack took a sip. let it burn down his throat. Closed his eyes for just a second. When he opened them again, one of the three men, the one in the denim jacket, was standing, moving toward the back exit, trying to be subtle, failing completely. Jack set down the glass, left a 20 on the counter, turned. The young man froze halfway to the door. "Sit down," Jack said. Not loud, not threatening, just certain. The young man looked at his friends, looked at the door, looked at Jack, made the wrong choice. He bolted. Jack didn't run. Running was for people who weren't sure where their prey was going. Jack knew exactly where out the back into the alley toward whatever hole this kid thought was safe. Jack walked to the emergency exit, pushed it open. The alarm should have gone off. Someone had disabled it. Convenient. The alley behind El Lobo was all concrete and dumpsters and graffiti. The young man couldn't be more than 22, stood 20 feet away, breathing hard, looking for an escape route, looking at a dead end. Jack stepped into that alley, let the door close behind him. The sound echoed like a coffin lid. "What's your name?" Jack asked. The young man didn't answer, just stared. His hand moved to his waistband. Jack saw the shape of a gun under the shirt. "I wouldn't," Jack said. "Who the hell are you, old man?" Old man. Jack almost smiled. "Someone who wants answers. That woman you pushed today, Martha Morrison. She's my mother." The color drained from the kid's face like water from a broken glass. We didn't mean she fought back." "She's 84 years old," Jack said, and despite his best efforts, rage crept into his voice like smoke under a door. "You put her in the hospital, broke her hip, gave her a concussion. At her age, those injuries can kill her. Do you understand that?" The young man's hand was definitely on the gun now. "I asked you a question," Jack said. "What's your name?" "Cody." Barely a whisper. "Cody Blake." Blake. Something stirred in Jack's memory. A name from a long time ago. A connection he couldn't quite make. "Who hired you, Cody?" "I don't." "Marcus Webb. I know about Webb. What I want to know is why. Why my mother? Why that purse?" Cody's eyes darted left, right, anywhere but at Jack. "We were just supposed to grab it. Quick job. In and out. Webb said there was something in it he needed." "What?" "I don't know, man. He didn't say just that it was important, that he'd pay $5,000 for it. We needed the money. It was just supposed to be easy." "Easy," Jack repeated. The word tasted like poison. "You put an elderly woman in the hospital for $5,000. Cody pulled the gun. It was a small revolver, probably a .38, shaking in the kid's hand like a leaf in a hurricane. Jack didn't move, just looked at Cody, really looked at him. Saw the fear, the desperation, the same stupid, reckless need that Jack had seen in mirrors when he was young and thought being dangerous made you strong. "You're not going to shoot me," Jack said. "I will, I swear to God." "No, you won't, because you're not a killer, Cody. You're a scared kid who made a bad choice. You're in over your head and you know it." The gun wavered. "Where's the purse?" Jack asked. "Webb has it. We brought it straight to him." "Where?" "I don't know. He took it and told us to lay low. That's why we're here. We're supposed to wait for him to call." Jack took a step forward. Cody backed up. The gun shook harder. "You have a choice right now," Jack said. "You can try to shoot me. Maybe you'll hit me. Probably you won't. Either way, your life ends here. You'll go to prison for assault, maybe attempted murder, if you pull that trigger." Another step. "Or," Jack continued, "you can put the gun down. You can tell me everything you know about Marcus Webb. And you can turn yourself in to the police with my recommendation that you cooperated." "Why would you do that?" "Because my mother taught me that everyone deserves a second chance, even people who don't deserve it." Jack stopped walking. 5 feet between them now. Close enough to see the tears starting in Cody's eyes. "She's lying in a hospital bed right now because of you, but she's the kind of woman who would tell me to give you mercy anyway." The gun lowered, just an inch. "I'm going to get justice for what you did," Jack said, "but I'm not going to get revenge. There's a difference, one my mother understands better than I do." The gun dropped completely. Cody stood there shaking, looking about 12 years old despite being 22. "Marcus Webb," Jack said again. "Where do I find him?" He operates out of Sunset Ridge." Jack frowned. "The old mining town that's been abandoned for 20 years. "Not all of it. Webb has a place there. Private. Where he does business that—" Cody swallowed. "Business that doesn't show up on any books." "How do I get there?" Cody gave directions. His voice was mechanical now. Defeated. The adrenaline draining away and leaving only exhaustion. When he finished, Jack nodded. "Call the police. Tell them you're turning yourself in for the assault on Martha Morrison. Tell them I said you cooperated. It won't make what you did okay, but it's a start. What about Webb? He'll kill me if he finds out I talked. Webb is going to have bigger problems than you, Jack said. Trust me. He turned to walk away. Mr. Morrison. Jack looked back. Cody's face was wet with tears now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We didn't know I'm sorry. Jack studied him for a long moment. Saw the truth in it. Saw the regret. Saw a kid who'd made a terrible mistake and would carry it for the rest of his life. Just like Jack had carried his own mistakes. Tell that to my mother, Jack said. When she wakes up, you go to that hospital and you tell her yourself. He left Cody standing in the alley and walked back through El Lobo. The bar was still silent. Everyone watched him leave. No one moved to stop him. Outside, the sun was starting its descent toward the horizon, the day bleeding into evening. Phoenix turning from furnace to cooling ember. Jack got on his bike, started the engine, sat there for a moment feeling the vibration through his legs, through his spine, through the parts of him that remembered this feeling like a first language. Sunset Ridge, 60 miles north. Abandoned mining town turned ghost town turned apparently Marcus Webb's private kingdom. Jack checked his phone. 4:15 p.m. If he left now, he'd arrive just after 6, right around sunset. Fitting somehow. But first he had one more stop to make. The hospital parking garage was half empty. Jack found a spot near the elevator, killed the engine, sat in the fluorescent silence. Through his jacket, he could feel the locket against his chest. He'd moved it to an inside pocket. Safer there. Closer. He took the elevator to the 4th floor. Walked the familiar hallway to room 7. Inside, his mother lay exactly as he'd left her, but her color was better, her breathing steadier. The machines sang their steady rhythm. Jack pulled the chair close, sat down, took her hand. Hi, Mom, he said quietly. I found it, the locket, and the letter, from Dad. Martha's eyelids flickered but didn't open. I know about Uncle Franklin, Jack continued. About what happened, about what Dad did, what he didn't do. He paused. I'm not angry at him anymore. I understand. The heart monitor beeped its steady pulse. I'm going to finish it, Jack said, what Franklin started, what Dad was too scared to finish. I'm going to make sure those men, whoever they are, whoever they've become, I'm going to make sure they answer for what they did. He squeezed her hand gently. I know what you'd say. You'd tell me that revenge is poison, that I spent 32 years walking away from violence and I shouldn't go back, that you didn't raise me to be that man anymore. Jack's throat tightened. But you also raised me to protect family, to stand up for what's right, to be brave when being brave is hard. He leaned closer. Dad's letter said to be braver than he was. I'm trying, Mom. I'm trying. For a long moment, nothing. Just the two of them, mother and son, connected by touch and time and blood. Then Martha's eyes opened. Not all the way, not clear, but open. She looked at Jack, saw him, recognized him. Jack, she whispered, I'm here. Don't. Each word was an effort. Don't become what you were. Mom, promise me. Her grip tightened with surprising strength. Promise. You won't lose yourself. Jack felt something break inside his chest. Some carefully constructed wall he'd built between who he was and who he'd been. I promise, he said and meant it. I promise I'll come back. I promise I'm still your son. Martha's eyes closed again, but there was peace in her face now. Trust. Jack sat with her until visiting hours ended, until a nurse came and gently told him he needed to leave. He kissed his mother's forehead, whispered, I love you. And then he walked out of the hospital, got on his Harley, and pointed it north, toward Sunset Ridge, toward Marcus Webb, toward answers. The sun was setting as Jack left Phoenix behind. The desert spread out around him, endless and ancient and indifferent to human drama. The highway unwound beneath his wheels like a ribbon of asphalt, connecting past to present, connecting the man he'd been to the man he was becoming again. Or maybe the man he'd always been underneath it all. The engine roared, the wind screamed, and Jack Morrison rode toward his reckoning, carrying his mother's locket over his heart and his father's shame on his shoulders. Sunset Ridge waited in the gathering dark, and with it the truth about what had happened 50 years ago. The truth about who had killed Uncle Franklin. The truth about who Jack Morrison really was and who he would choose to be when the moment came. Behind him, Phoenix glowed in the rearview mirror. Ahead, the desert swallowed the road, and somewhere between the two, a 67-year-old man who'd spent half his life running from his past finally stopped running and started hunting. The desert at dusk was a cathedral of silence. Jack had forgotten this, how the land could swallow sound, could make a man feel both infinite and infinitesimal at the same time. The highway cut north through terrain that hadn't changed in 10,000 years. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels. Rocks the color of dried blood caught the last light. The sky bled from blue to purple to black stars emerging one by one like witnesses gathering for testimony. 60 miles between Phoenix and Sunset Ridge. An hour of riding through country that remembered when this land belonged to no one, when borders were meaningless, and the only law was survival. Jack's hands on the handlebars were steady despite everything, despite the rage simmering in his chest like banked coals, despite the fear, and yes, it was fear. He could admit that now that he was making a mistake, that his mother was right, that going back to who he'd been was a door that once opened wouldn't close again. The turnoff to Sunset Ridge appeared as a ghost might suddenly half-hidden, easy to miss if you weren't looking. A dirt road leading west into nothing, no signs, no lights, just tire tracks in the dust, and the knowledge that something existed out there in the dark. Jack slowed, turned. The Harley's engine changed pitch as pavement gave way to packed earth. The road wound through increasingly rough terrain. Rocks jutted from the ground like broken teeth. Scrub brush clawed at the darkness. In the distance, maybe 3 miles ahead, Jack could see lights, faint, scattered. The ghost town wasn't quite as dead as he'd thought. He killed his headlight, rode the last mile by moonlight and instinct. Better to arrive unseen. Better to understand what he was walking into before he walked into it. The first buildings appeared like shipwrecks emerging from fog. Old structures from the mining days, the 1920s, maybe when men had come here chasing copper and silver and dreams of wealth. Most of it was rubble now, collapsed roofs, walls dissolved by time and weather. But here and there, signs of recent activity. A building with a new roof, tire tracks, the smell of generator fuel on the wind. Jack stopped a quarter mile out, got off the bike, stood in the darkness and listened. Voices, distant but clear in the desert air. Men talking, laughing, the clink of bottles. Somewhere a radio playing country music from a decade ago. He moved forward on foot, leaving the Harley hidden behind an outcropping of rock. His boots were soft-soled, designed for motorcycles, but quiet enough for stalking. Old skills returning. The ability to move through space without disturbing it, to become part of the landscape rather than an intrusion upon it. The voices came from what had once been the town's main building, probably the mining company's headquarters. 2 stories, stone construction, still mostly intact. Light spilled from windows covered with something plastic sheeting maybe or canvas, keeping the light in and curious eyes out. Jack circled around back, found what he was looking for, a window half covered just enough gap to see inside. 3 men sat around a table playing cards, beer bottles scattered like ammunition casings, money in the middle of the table. All 3 were young 30s at most, hard-looking, the kind of hard that came from violence as profession rather than passion. None of them were Marcus Webb. Jack watched for 10 minutes, learned their rhythm, the way they moved, which one was jumpy, which one was confident, which one kept looking at the door like he was expecting someone. The one expecting someone stood up. "I'm going to check the perimeter." The other 2 barely acknowledged him. Cards were more interesting than caution. Jack moved away from the window, waited in the shadows beside the building's corner, counted to 30 in his head. The man emerged from a side door, flashlight and hand cigarette dangling from his lips. He walked the perimeter like a man going through motions. Bored, unaware. Jack stepped out when the man's back was turned. "Don't move!" The man froze. The cigarette fell from his lips, bounced once on the ground, glowed briefly in the dark. "Hands where I can see them," Jack said quietly. The man raised his hands slowly. "Who?" "Quiet. You make noise, your friends come running, and this gets messy. You understand?" A nod. "Turn around, slowly." The man turned, saw Jack, saw the leather jacket, saw something in Jack's eyes that made his own eyes widen. "Marcus Webb," Jack said. "Where is he?" "I don't—" Jack took 1 step forward. That was all it took. The man's jaw clenched. Fear response. Prey recognizing predator. "Let's try that again," Jack said. "Marcus Webb, where—" "He's not here. He left yesterday. Won't be back until tomorrow." Jack studied the man's face, looking for the lie. Didn't find it. "Where did he go?" "I don't know, man, I swear. He doesn't tell us his business. We just watch the place while he's gone." The purse, Jack said. The one brought here this afternoon. 3 men robbery on Grant Street. Where is it? Now the man's eyes shifted. A tell. I don't know about any purse. Jack's hand moved faster than the man could track, grabbed his collar, pulled him close enough to smell the beer on his breath. Wrong answer. Okay, okay. The man's voice pitched higher. Webb took it with him. Whatever was in it, he wanted it bad. Said it was worth more than all of us combined. Said if we touched it, we'd end up in the desert in pieces. Where did he take it? I told you I don't know. He got a call yesterday. Someone called him about something from the old days, about some kind of evidence. He went crazy when he heard, started making phone calls. Then he took off, said he had to verify something, check with someone who'd know the truth. Jack's mind worked through possibilities. The microfilm, Webb knew about it, had known for a while probably. The robbery wasn't random, it was targeted. Webb had sent those boys specifically for Martha's purse, specifically for the locket. But he didn't have it. Jack did, which meant Webb had the purse but not what he was looking for, which meant he'd be frustrated, dangerous, scrambling to figure out where the locket went, which meant Jack had leverage. When does he come back? Tomorrow, early. He said he'd be here by noon. Jack released the man, stepped back. You're going to forget this conversation happened. You're going to go back inside and finish your card game. You're going to act like everything is normal. And tomorrow when Webb arrives, you're not going to mention me. Understand? The man nodded frantically. If you warn him, Jack continued, I'll know, and I'll come back. And next time we won't just talk. He melted back into the shadows before the man could respond, moved like smoke through the ruins, back to his bike, back to the darkness. Jack sat on the Harley for a moment, not starting it, just thinking. Webb would be back tomorrow, noon. That gave Jack tonight and tomorrow morning to prepare, to plan, to decide exactly how he wanted this to play out. But more than that, Webb was out there right now trying to verify something, trying to talk to someone who'd know about the evidence from 1972. Who would know someone from that era, someone who'd been involved, someone who'd survived, or someone who'd been there when Franklin Morrison died? Jack's phone buzzed. He pulled it out expecting maybe Dr. Patterson with an update, but the number was unknown. Text message. Mr. Morrison, we should talk. Before tomorrow. Before things get complicated. M.W. Marcus Webb. Jack stared at the message. Webb knew that Jack had the locket, knew that Jack was coming, was reaching out, trying to control the narrative, or trying to warn him. Jack typed, where and when? The response came fast. El Lobo, 6 a.m. tomorrow. Just you and me. No games. Jack sent, agreed. He looked at his phone. Nearly 8 p.m. now. 6 a.m. was 10 hours away. He could ride back to Phoenix, get a few hours of sleep. But the truth was he wouldn't sleep. Not with everything churning in his mind. He needed answers. Real answers. The kind you couldn't get from scared guards and old letters and cryptic text messages. He needed to talk to someone who'd been there. Someone who remembered 1972. Someone who knew the names on that microfilm and what they meant. He needed Wyatt Kane. Jack started the Harley. The engine's roar shattered the desert silence. He didn't care about stealth anymore. Let Webb's men hear him leave. Let them report back that someone had come asking questions. It didn't matter. By tomorrow at 6 a.m., everything would be out in the open anyway. The ride back to Phoenix took longer than the ride out. Jack wasn't in a hurry. The night was cool, the stars were out, and he needed time to think, to let the pieces arrange themselves. His father had been protecting the evidence for 50 years, hiding it in plain sight. The locket around Martha's neck worn every day containing the bomb that could destroy careers and lives and legacies. Marcus Webb knew about it, was willing to hurt an 84-year-old woman to get it, was important enough, connected enough that he operated out of a ghost town with armed guards and no oversight. But who was Webb really? Not just a businessman, not just a criminal. Something else. Something connected to the past in a way Jack didn't fully understand yet. The outskirts of Phoenix appeared on the horizon, lights spreading across the valley floor like fallen stars. All those lives, all those stories, all that human struggle playing out under the indifferent desert sky. Jack thought about his mother's words at the hospital, her insistence that he remember Linda Webb, her pause when she said the name, as if there was something there, some connection she'd made but hadn't said out loud. Linda Webb, schoolteacher, Franklin Morrison's wife, pregnant when Franklin died, lost the baby a month later. Or did she? The thought hit Jack like a physical thing. What if Linda hadn't lost the baby? What if she'd lied? What if she'd given birth in secret and raised the child far away from the Morrison family, far from Phoenix, far from the danger that had killed Franklin? What if she'd raised that child under her maiden name Webb, Marcus Webb? The pieces clicked into place with an almost audible snap. Marcus Webb wasn't just some criminal looking for evidence to destroy. He was Franklin Morrison's son. He was family. He was looking for the microfilm because he wanted to know the truth about his father's death, about who his father really was, about what had happened 52 years ago. Jack's hands tightened on the handlebars. If this was true, if Marcus was Franklin's son, then everything changed. This wasn't about revenge or covering up crimes. This was about a man trying to understand his own blood, his own history, the legacy he'd inherited without knowing it. Jack understood that, understood it in his bones. He pulled over on the shoulder of the highway, sat there in the darkness, engine idling, mind racing. If Marcus Webb was Franklin Morrison's son, then the meeting tomorrow at 6 a.m. wasn't just about the locket. It was about family, about truth, about two men connected by blood and violence and 50 years of secrets finally coming face to face. Jack pulled out his phone, called the one person who might be able to confirm his theory. Wyatt Kane answered on the second ring. Iron Wolf, you got a death wish calling me at 8:30 on a weeknight? I need to ask you something about Franklin Morrison. Wyatt's tone changed, became serious. What about him? His wife, Linda. She was pregnant when he died. Yeah, lost the baby, month after the funeral. Grief, the doctors said. You sure about that? Silence on the other end. Then, what are you thinking? I'm thinking maybe she didn't lose the baby. Maybe she lied. Maybe she had the child and raised it somewhere else. Away from Phoenix, away from anyone who'd know. More silence. Jack could almost hear Wyatt's mind working through the implications. Under her maiden name, Wyatt said slowly. Webb. Marcus Webb. Jesus Christ. Wyatt's breath came out in a rush. That would make him Franklin's son, my cousin, family. And he's been looking for the locket because his mother probably told him about it before she died, told him about Franklin, about the evidence, about what really happened. Jack paused. He's not trying to destroy the evidence, Wyatt. He's trying to understand it, to know the truth about his father. Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? I'm meeting him tomorrow. 6 a.m. El Lobo Bar. Alone. He asked for just the two of us. Jack, I know, but if he's Franklin's son, if he's family, then I owe him the truth. I owe him the chance to know his father, even if it's 50 years too late. You're assuming he doesn't already know. What if he knows exactly who he is and he's trying to protect the Webb family name? What if he wants to destroy that evidence to keep his grandfather's crimes hidden? Jack had thought about that. Then I'll deal with it. But I don't think that's what this is. I think this is about a man who just found out his whole life was built on a lie, who just discovered his real father was murdered, who's trying to make sense of it all. You sound pretty sure. I am, because I've been that man. When I found out my father hid the truth for 50 years, when I realized everything I thought I knew about him was incomplete, I understand what Marcus is going through. I understand it perfectly. Wyatt sighed. You want backup anyway? No, but I want you to do something else. What? I need you to find out everything you can about Marcus Webb. Real information. Not just what's public. I need to know if my theory is right. If there's any proof that Linda Webb had a child, birth records, school records, anything. That's a tall order for 10 hours. You know people. People who know people. People who can access records that aren't supposed to be accessible. You're asking me to break laws, brother. I'm asking you to help me figure out if the man I'm meeting tomorrow is family or enemy. There's a difference. Wyatt was silent. Then, I'll make some calls. But Jack, yeah, if this goes sideways tomorrow, if Webb turns out to be something other than what you think he is, you call me. Immediately. You don't try to be Iron Wolf. You don't try to handle it alone. You hear me. I hear you. I'm serious. Your mama's already in the hospital. I'm not letting you end up there too. Or worse. I'll be careful. That's what every man says before he does something stupid. Wyatt's voice softened. But I'll do the digging. Give me till 5 a.m. I'll text you what I find. Thanks, preacher. Don't thank me yet. And Jack, whatever happens tomorrow, remember who you are now, not who you were. The line went dead. Jack sat on the shoulder of the highway for another few minutes. Cars passed occasionally, headlights sweeping over him and then gone. Anonymous travelers moving through the night, each with their own stories, their own destinations, their own secrets. He thought about his promise to his mother, about not becoming what he'd been, about staying true to the man he'd spent 32 years trying to become. But he also thought about justice, about truth, about finishing what Franklin Morrison had started and what his father had been too afraid to complete. The two didn't have to be in conflict. He could honor his promise and still do what was right. He just had to be smart about it, had to think instead of react, had to choose his battles and his methods with care. He could be Jack Morrison and still get justice for his family. He just had to remember which one he was. Jack started the Harley again, pulled back onto the highway. Phoenix sprawled ahead of him, all light and heat and human density. Somewhere in that sprawl, his mother lay healing. Somewhere out there, Marcus Webb was searching for answers to questions he'd only just learned to ask. And somewhere in Jack's jacket pocket, a locket the size of his palm held secrets that could rewrite 50 years of history. Tomorrow at 6 a.m., all of it would come together, for better or worse. Wyatt's garage sat on the south side of Phoenix, in a neighborhood that hadn't gentrified yet and probably never would. Honest work, working people, the kind of place where a motorcycle repair shop could survive on skill and reputation rather than trendy branding. Jack pulled up just before 10 p.m. The lights were still on. Through the bay windows, he could see Wyatt bent over an engine, moving with the slow precision of someone who'd done the same job 10,000 times and still found satisfaction in getting it right. Jack knocked on the side door 3 times. Pause. 2 times. Old signal from old days. The door opened immediately. Wyatt stood there, 70 years old, but still built like the boxer he'd been in his youth. Gray beard down to his chest, arms tattooed with faded ink that told the story of a life lived hard and somehow survived. "Iron Wolf," Wyatt said. Not surprised, not anything, just stating fact. "Preacher." They looked at each other, brothers in everything but blood, connected by a past that had shaped them both. "You look like hell," Wyatt said. "Feel worse." "Good. Means you're thinking instead of just reacting." Wyatt stepped aside. "Come in. I already started making calls." Jack stepped inside. The garage smelled like home oil and metal and the honest sweat of labor. 3 bikes in various states of repair, tools organized with military precision, a small office in the back with a cot and a coffee maker, and a shelf of books that would surprise anyone who thought bikers didn't read. Wyatt gestured to a pair of folding chairs, grabbed 2 beers from a mini fridge, handed one to Jack without asking. They sat. "I called Tommy Hernandez," Wyatt said. "You remember Tommy? Records clerk, Maricopa County. Not anymore. He's with the state now. Vital records, birth certificates, death certificates, all that official paper trail bullshit." Wyatt took a long pull from his beer. "I asked him to look for any births to a Linda Webb between 1972 and 1973. Arizona and surrounding states. And he's looking. Said he'd have something by midnight." Wyatt leaned back, chair creaking. "But I also called someone else. Someone who might know more than any record could tell us." Jack waited. "Margaret Sullivan, Harriet Sullivan's older sister." "You met Harriet, the flower shop lady?" "Yeah, she witnessed the robbery." "Right. Well, Margaret is 86, lives in a care facility now. But back in the day, she was a labor and delivery nurse at Good Samaritan Hospital. Worked there from 1968 to 1995. Wyatt's eyes met Jack's. "She remembers Linda Morrison, Linda Webb as she was before the marriage." Jack's heart rate picked up. "She remembers the pregnancy. She remembers more than that. She remembers Linda coming in 4 months pregnant in July of 1972. Franklin had just died. Linda was devastated. Margaret was assigned to her case because they'd known each other. Socially, Linda had taught Margaret's daughter in elementary school." "What happened?" "Linda delivered a healthy baby boy in November 1972. Full term. No complications, but..." Wyatt paused. "Linda made Margaret promise not to tell anyone. Said the baby wasn't safe. That the same people who'd killed Franklin would come for the child if they knew he existed. She begged Margaret to falsify the records, to make it look like the baby had died." Jack set down his beer. "Margaret did it. Margaret did it. Against every rule in the book, against her own better judgment, she did it. Because she believed Linda. Because she'd seen the fear in that woman's eyes. Because Wyatt's voice dropped. Because Margaret had also heard the rumors about Franklin Morrison's death not being an accident, about powerful people being involved, about corruption that went all the way to the top. What name did Linda give the baby? Marcus. Marcus Webb, not Morrison. She wanted to keep him completely separate from that name, from that danger. There it was, confirmation. Jack's theory was right. Marcus Webb was Franklin Morrison's son. Margaret kept the secret for 50 years, Wyatt continued, never told anyone, not even her own family. She said it was the hardest thing she ever did watching that baby be recorded as dead when he was alive and healthy. But she believed she was saving his life. Jack absorbed this, processed it, the weight of it settling into his bones. Does Margaret know where Linda took the baby? Tucson initially, then California, then back to Arizona eventually, but Flagstaff, not Phoenix. Linda raised Marcus away from everyone who'd known Franklin, away from the Morrison family, away from the danger. And now he's back, looking for answers about a father he never knew. Wyatt nodded. That's my read on it. Margaret said something else interesting. She said Linda came to see her about 6 months ago, right before Linda died. Linda told her the secret would die with her, but that she'd left a letter for Marcus, telling him everything, asking him to understand why she'd lied. 6 months ago, Jack said. That's when Marcus started searching. That's when this all started. Looks like it. Jack stood, paced to the window, looked out at the Phoenix night. So tomorrow when I meet him, I'm not meeting an enemy. I'm meeting family, a cousin I never knew existed, a man who's been living under false pretenses his entire life. Maybe, Wyatt said carefully, or maybe you're meeting a man who's angry, who feels betrayed, who wants revenge for his father's death and doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. You think he'd hurt my mother deliberately? I think grief makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. I think finding out your whole life was a lie can twist a man up inside. Wyatt's eyes were serious. I think you need to go into that meeting prepared for anything, including the possibility that Marcus Webb isn't the man you want him to be. Jack thought about that, about the Marcus Webb he'd constructed in his mind, a man searching for truth, for connection, for understanding of his father's legacy. But Wyatt was right. That was speculation. Hope even. The reality might be very different. I'll be careful, Jack said. You already promised your mama you wouldn't lose yourself. Make sure you keep that promise even if things get ugly. I will. Wyatt's phone buzzed. He checked it. Tommy, he found something. Jack moved closer as Wyatt read the message. Birth certificate, Marcus Francis Webb, born November 14, 1972. Tucson, Arizona. Mother Linda Marie Webb, father unknown. Wyatt looked up. The father field is blank. Linda made sure of that. No legal connection to Franklin Morrison at all. Smart, Jack said. Protects the child from anyone who might come looking. Or protects the family from claims on the Morrison estate, depending on how cynical you want to be. Jack shook his head. I don't think it was about money. I think it was about survival. Linda saw what happened to Franklin. She wasn't going to let it happen to their son. So what's your play tomorrow? Jack sat back down. Thought about it. I tell him the truth. All of it. I show him the microfilm. Let him see the evidence his father died collecting. Let him understand what Franklin was trying to do. And if he wants to destroy it, to protect the Webb family name, then I tell him the truth about that too, that his grandfather, Colonel James Webb, was one of the men on that list, one of the men Franklin was investigating, that his grandfather was likely involved in ordering Franklin's death. Jack's voice was steady. And then I let him choose, destroy the evidence and protect a legacy built on corruption and murder, or release it and honor his father's sacrifice. That's a hell of a choice to put on a man. It's the same choice my father faced, the same choice I'm facing now, the same choice anyone faces when they discover their family's secrets. Jack met Wyatt's eyes. The only difference is this time the person making the choice gets to make it with full knowledge, with truth, not fear. Wyatt nodded slowly. You've thought this through. I've had 67 years to think about what it means to carry family shame, to wonder if your father was a coward or just a man doing his best in an impossible situation. I'm not going to let Marcus spend the rest of his life wondering the same thing about Franklin, even if the truth destroys him. The truth won't destroy him. The lies already did that. The truth, painful as it is, that's what sets you free. They sat in silence for a while. Two old men in a garage surrounded by machines and memories trying to figure out how to fix something that had been broken for half a century. You should get some rest, Wyatt finally said. You got, he checked his watch, 7 hours till that meeting. I'm not going to sleep. Figured as much, but you can rest, you can think, you can prepare. Wyatt gestured to the cot in the back office. Stay here. I'll keep working. When Tommy sends anything else, I'll wake you. Jack wanted to argue, wanted to insist he needed to keep moving, keep thinking, keep doing something. But Wyatt was right. He needed to be sharp tomorrow, needed to be present, needed to be the best version of himself he could manage. Okay, Jack said. Thanks, preacher. We take care of our own. Wyatt's voice was gruff. Even the ones who left the life, maybe especially them. Jack moved to the cot, lay down, stared at the ceiling. Listened to Wyatt moving around the garage, the familiar sounds of tools and work, and a life lived in service of fixing things. His phone buzzed. Text from the hospital. Mr. Morrison, your mother is resting well, all vitals stable. She asked about you when she woke briefly. We told her you'd be by in the morning. Dr. Patterson, Jack typed back. Thank you, I'll be there. He thought about visiting Martha before the meeting, but 6 a.m. to the hospital and back would be tight. And more importantly, if the meeting went badly, if things spiraled, he didn't want the last image his mother had of him to be the one heading into danger. Better to see her after, when it was done, when he could tell her he'd kept his promise. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Tomorrow changes everything, for both of us. Be ready, MW. Jack stared at the message, the weight of it, the finality. Marcus was right. Tomorrow would change everything. 50 years of secrets coming to light. Family connections revealed. Truth ugly, complicated, painful truth finally exposed. Jack closed his eyes. Not to sleep, just to think, to plan, to prepare for the conversation that would define everything that came after. At midnight, Wyatt's voice pulled him back. Jack, Tommy sent more. Jack sat up. Wyatt handed him his phone. The screen showed a document. Old, scanned from paper. A police report from 1972. Investigation into the death of Franklin James Morrison. Single vehicle motorcycle accident. Interstate 10-mile marker 147. Victim pronounced dead at scene. Blood alcohol content 0.19. Cause of death, blunt force trauma consistent with high-speed crash. Conclusion, accidental death due to driving while intoxicated. Case closed. But there was more. Notes in the margin, handwritten, different ink. Witness reports inconsistent. Vehicle debris pattern suggests secondary collision. Recommend further investigation. And a signature, Detective William Reeves. Below that, another note. Different handwriting. Official. Authoritative. Investigation closed by order of Captain Dale Morrison. No further action required. Jack's blood went cold. Morrison? Dale Morrison? No relation to your family, Wyatt said. Different Morrison. But Tommy found something else about him. Wyatt pulled up another document. Dale Morrison, Phoenix PD Captain, 1968 to 1978. Retired under investigation for corruption. Died 1980. And look at this, his son. Another document. More recent. Cody Morrison Blake, age 28. Mother Susan Blake, formerly married to Dale Morrison. Cody took his stepfather's name after Dale died. Jack stood up. Cody Blake, the kid who robbed my mother. Not random, Wyatt said. None of this is random. Webb knew exactly who to send. He sent the grandson of the cop who covered up Franklin's murder. The pieces were all coming together now. Marcus Webb hadn't just been searching for evidence. He'd been building a case, tracking down the descendants of the men who'd killed his father, confronting the legacy of corruption that had shaped his entire life. And somehow that search had led him to Martha Morrison, to the locket, to the microfilm Franklin had died protecting. Marcus knows, Jack said. He knows everything. The connections, the conspiracies. Who killed his father and who covered it up. Looks like it. So why does he want to meet me? Why reach out? Wyatt was quiet for a moment. Then, maybe for the same reason you want to meet him. Because you're family. Because you're the only two people left who have a right to decide what happens to that evidence. Because he paused. Because sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with fists. They're fought with truth. And he needs an ally for that fight. Someone who understands what he's going through. Jack looked at the documents again, at the web of corruption and murder and cover-ups that had entangled both their families for 50 years. Tomorrow at 6 a.m., Jack said. One way or another, this ends. Or it begins, Wyatt said. Depends on what you both choose. Jack didn't sleep. Couldn't. Instead, he spent the night reading through the documents Wyatt had gathered. building a timeline, understanding the full scope of what Franklin Morrison had uncovered and what it had cost him. The weapons smuggling operation had been massive. Military surplus sold to criminal organizations. Profits laundered through legitimate businesses. Politicians paid off. Law enforcement corrupted. A network that stretched from Arizona to Washington, D.C. from 1969 through 1974 until Franklin Morrison started asking questions. And then silence. Franklin dead. The investigation closed. The evidence hidden. The guilty men walking free, retiring with honors, dying of old age in comfortable beds. Until now. At 5 a.m., Wyatt's phone buzzed again. He read the message, looked at Jack. Margaret Sullivan passed away about an hour ago, peacefully in her sleep. Jack closed his eyes. The last living witness to Marcus Webb's birth, the woman who'd kept the secret for 50 years, gone. She held on long enough to tell the truth, Wyatt said quietly. That means something. It means the secret isn't a secret anymore. It means the protection Linda tried to build around her son, it's gone. Everything's out in the open now. Which means Marcus is vulnerable, exposed. He's got to be feeling that. Jack stood, stretched. His back popped. His knees ached. 67 years of living, all of it catching up to him at once. I need to go, he said. Meeting's in an hour. You want company? No, this is something I need to do alone. Wyatt walked him to the door, put a hand on Jack's shoulder. You're a good man, Jack Morrison. Your mama raised you right. Don't forget that when things get hard. I won't. And Jack? Yeah, Franklin would be proud. What you're doing, how you're doing it, he'd be proud. Jack nodded. Couldn't speak past the tightness in his throat. He got on his Harley. The engine roared to life. The sound echoed off the buildings in the pre-dawn darkness. Phoenix was quiet at this hour, the city holding its breath between night and day. Jack rode through empty streets, past darkened buildings, past the lives of people still sleeping, unaware that in a few hours the news would break about a 50-year-old conspiracy finally coming to light. El Lobo appeared ahead. The parking lot was empty except for one vehicle, a black Mercedes, expensive, well-maintained. Marcus Webb was already there. Jack pulled into the lot, parked his Harley 20 feet from the Mercedes, killed the engine. The silence was absolute. For a long moment, neither man moved. They just sat in their vehicles, two strangers connected by blood and history, preparing for a conversation that would change everything. Then Marcus Webb opened his door, stepped out, and Jack Morrison did the same. They stood there in the empty parking lot as the first light of dawn began to break over Phoenix. Two men, two families, 50 years of secrets between them, and one question. What happens when the truth finally comes out? Jack was about to find out. Dawn broke over Phoenix like a promise the city couldn't keep. Jack stood in the parking lot of El Lobo, watching the sky turn from black to purple to the pale blue of morning. The bar looked different in daylight, smaller, shabbier, the kind of place that needed darkness to maintain its mystique. Graffiti on the walls, broken glass in the gravel, the desperate architecture of a business that survived on things people wanted to forget. His Harley ticked as the engine cooled. He'd arrived 20 minutes early. Old habit. Never walk into a meeting blind. Never give the other man the advantage of familiarity with the terrain. The street was empty. Too early for traffic. Too late for the people who'd been out all night. That liminal hour when the city held its breath between what had been and what would be. Jack's phone showed 5:58 a.m. 2 minutes. He thought about calling Wyatt, telling him the plan had changed. That Jack was meeting Webb alone against everything they'd agreed. But Wyatt would just argue, and Jack didn't have the energy for arguments. Not anymore. This was between him and Marcus Webb, between past and present, between two men trying to understand the fathers who'd shaped them. At exactly 6 a.m., a black Mercedes pulled into the lot. Expensive, well-maintained, the kind of car that announced success without shouting about it. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Marcus Webb looked nothing like Jack had imagined. No scar, no obvious menace. Just a man in his early 50s wearing jeans and a button-down shirt, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd learned early that the world was dangerous and preparation was survival. He was tall, lean, silver hair cut short, eyes that assessed Jack from 30 feet away with the kind of intelligence that couldn't be faked. They stood there for a moment, two men in an empty parking lot measuring each other. Webb spoke first. Mr. Morrison, thank you for coming. You said we needed to talk. We do. Webb gestured to the bar. Inside. Out here is fine. Webb nodded. accepted it, walked closer but stopped a respectful distance away. 10 feet, far enough that neither could reach the other without telegraphing intent. Close enough to talk without shouting. I know who you are, Webb said. Iron Wolf, Hell's Angels, 1980s through early 90s. Left the life after your mother's accident, but went straight, opened a garage, stayed clean for 32 years. You did your homework. I always do. Webb's eyes were steady, unafraid. I also know about the locket, about what my men did to your mother. I'm sorry for that. Jack's jaw tightened. Sorry doesn't fix a broken hip. No, it doesn't. Webb took a breath. They were supposed to take the purse. Nothing more. Quick grab, no violence. When I heard what actually happened, you did what fired them, turned them in. I sent them away, told them never to come back to Arizona. Webb's voice was flat. It's not enough. I know that. But it's what I could do without making things worse. Jack studied him, looking for the lie, for the manipulation. Found only something that looked like genuine regret. Why? Jack asked. Why target my mother? Why that purse? Webb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, more human. Because I've been looking for that locket my entire life, and I didn't know it was around your mother's neck until 3 days ago. How did you find out? My mother died 6 months ago. Linda Webb. She left me a letter. Final confession, she called it. Webb's hands clenched and unclenched. She told me everything. About my real father, about how he died, about the evidence he'd gathered, about the locket. Jack felt something shift in his chest. Confirmation. Franklin Morrison. Webb's eyes widened slightly. Surprised. You know? My mother told me, last night, she remembered Linda being pregnant at Franklin's funeral. My mother lied to everyone, said she lost the baby, moved to Tucson, raised me under her maiden name, told me my father was a man named James Webb, who died when I was young. Marcus laughed, bitter. Turns out James Webb was my grandfather, Colonel, U.S. Army, and according to my mother's letter, one of the men Franklin Morrison was investigating. So you grew up thinking that my grandfather was a hero, a decorated officer, a man who served his country with honor. Marcus's voice cracked. I built my whole identity on that. Military school, ROTC. Almost joined the Army myself until my mother begged me not to. I didn't understand why at the time. Jack could see it now, the weight Marcus had been carrying. The foundation his life had been built on suddenly revealed as sand. The microfilm, Jack said. You wanted to see if it was true, if your grandfather was really corrupt. I wanted to know who my father was, my real father, Franklin Morrison. Marcus looked at Jack directly. I wanted to know if he was the hero my mother described in her letter, or if he was just as dirty as the men he was investigating. I wanted to know the truth. The honesty of it hit Jack like a physical thing. This wasn't about covering up crimes. This was about a man trying to understand his own blood. I have the locket, Jack said. Marcus went very still. I know. How? Because my men brought me your mother's purse. I tore it apart looking for the locket. It wasn't there, which meant either she wasn't wearing it that day or someone got to it first. Marcus's eyes held Jack's. I'm betting you went to her apartment, found it before I could. Jack didn't confirm or deny. What would you do if you had it? Look at the evidence, see the names, understand what really happened in 1972. Marcus took a step closer. Then I'd decide what to do with it, whether to bury it or expose it. And if your grandfather's name is on that list, if he really was corrupt, then I'd want to know why, what he was involved in, whether he had a choice. Marcus's voice hardened. And I'd want to know who killed my father. Jack reached into his jacket. Marcus tensed, hand moving toward his waistband. Jack moved slowly, deliberately, pulled out not a weapon, but the locket. The gold caught the morning light, swung gently on its chain. Marcus stared at it like a man seeing a ghost. Your father, Franklin Morrison, he was my uncle, Jack said. My father's older brother. He raised my dad after their parents died. Everything my father knew about being a man, he learned from Franklin. Marcus seemed to have trouble breathing. Your family? Yeah, we are. The weight of that hung between them. Two men connected by blood and violence and 50 years of secrets. My father spent his whole life carrying shame, Jack continued, because when Franklin was murdered, my dad had evidence that could have brought the killers to justice. But he was threatened, told that if he used it, his family would die. So he hid it, gave the locket to my mother. and spent 30 years wishing he'd been braver. He was protecting you. I know that now. Didn't know it when he died. I thought Jack's voice caught. I thought he was just weak. Marcus nodded, understanding. My mother told me Franklin was the bravest man she'd ever known, that he could have walked away from what he'd discovered, could have pretended not to see the corruption, but he couldn't live with himself if he did. Sounds like my uncle. Your uncle. Marcus repeated the words like learning a new language. Christ, I have an uncle. Had an uncle. Richard Morrison. He died in 1992. Heart attack. 2 months after my mother's car accident. Jack paused. He never knew about you. Never knew Franklin had a son. It would have meant everything to him. Silence stretched between them. Not hostile, just heavy with the weight of lost time, lost connections, lost chances to be family. I need to see it, Marcus said finally. The microfilm, I need to know. Jack held up the locket. The truth isn't easy. Whatever's on here, it's going to hurt. It's going to change how you see your family. Both families. I know. And when you see it, you're going to have to make a choice about what to do with it, about whether justice matters more than protecting a legacy. I know that too. Jack looked at this man, his cousin technically, though they'd never met, never known each other existed, and saw something he recognized. The same struggle Jack had been fighting his whole life. The weight of fathers and their mistakes. The question of whether you honored family by hiding their sins or by exposing them. There's a place, Jack said. My garage, private. We can look at it there, together. Marcus hesitated. Why are you doing this after what happened to your mother? Because you're Franklin Morrison's son, and Franklin deserves to have his story told right. By family, Jack met his eyes. And because my mother taught me that revenge just creates more pain. But truth can set people free. Marcus considered this, nodded slowly. Your garage, lead the way. They rode in convoy through Phoenix as the city woke up. Jack on his Harley, Marcus following in the Mercedes. The morning commute was just beginning. People heading to jobs they tolerated to support lives they were building one day at a time. Jack thought about those lives, about how fragile they were, how easily they could be shattered by violence or loss or the revelation of ugly truths. He thought about his mother lying in a hospital bed, trusting him to handle this right. He thought about his promise. The garage appeared like sanctuary, small, honest, the kind of place where things got fixed instead of broken. Jack unlocked the side door. Marcus followed him inside, looked around at the tools, the bikes, the evidence of work done with care. You built this yourself? Marcus asked. 30 years ago, right after I left the Angels. It's good work. It's honest work. Jack moved to the office area, pulled out a laptop that was 10 years old but still functional. The kind of technology that couldn't be hacked remotely because it barely remembered how to connect to the internet. He opened the locket carefully, removed the photograph of his parents. Behind it, pressed flat against the backing, was the microfilm. Tiny, translucent, holding 50 years of secrets in a space smaller than a postage stamp. Marcus stared at it. That's it? That's what got my father killed? That's it. Jack had a scanner old but serviceable. He'd prepared for this moment, though he hadn't known Marcus would be here to see it. The microfilm went under the scanner. Jack adjusted the settings, magnification, contrast, resolution. The first image appeared on the screen. A document, typed, official, Department of Defense letterhead, dated March 1972. A list of names, ranks, positions, and beside each name a notation. Amounts, dates, bank account numbers, payments, bribes. Evidence of a network that stretched from Arizona to D.C., from local cops to military brass, all working together to move weapons from military stockpiles to criminal organizations. Jack scrolled down. More pages, more names. Photographs of men in uniforms shaking hands with men in expensive suits. Transfer documents. Shipping manifests. The entire operation laid out in meticulous detail. Franklin Morrison had been thorough. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. His breathing had changed. Shallow, quick. There, he said, pointing, Colonel James Webb, logistics coordinator. Monthly payment, $5,000. Total received $85,000. Marcus made a sound like he'd been punched. Jack kept scrolling. More names. Some Jack recognized from his father's stories. Some were strangers. All of them connected. All of them guilty. Then another page, different handwriting. Franklin's own notes. James Webb confirmed. Direct oversight of weapons transfer. Oldest daughter, Linda, unaware of father's activities. Must protect her. Plan to present evidence to FBI agent Morrison, no relation, next week. Marcus read it twice. 3 times. He was trying to protect my mother. Your father knew your mother's family was involved. He could have just walked away, could have divorced her, disappeared, saved himself. But he tried to protect her while still doing the right thing. More scrolling, more pages. Then something that made both men stop. A handwritten note. Different hand, rougher. Dated 2 days before Franklin's death. F. Morrison, getting too close. Recommend immediate action. Witnesses to be minimal. Make it look like accident. DUI motorcycle crash. Standard protocol. No signature. But below it another note in different ink. Approved. Web to coordinate. Timeline 48 hours. Marcus's hands were shaking. My grandfather ordered my father's death. Jack didn't say anything. What could he say? The evidence was there. Undeniable. A grandfather who'd murdered his own future grandson's father to protect a weapons smuggling operation. Marcus stepped back from the computer, walked to the other side of the garage, put his hands on a workbench and leaned forward, head down, breathing hard. Jack gave him space. Let him process. Let him grieve for the man he'd thought his grandfather was. Minutes passed. The only sound was Marcus's breathing and the distant traffic outside. Finally, Marcus spoke. My mother knew. What? She knew. Maybe not before Franklin died, but after. She must have found his notes, his investigation. Understood what had happened. Marcus's voice was hollow. That's why she lied about being pregnant. Why she moved away. Why she raised me under the web name but told me my father was dead. She was protecting me from both sides. From her father's legacy and from the truth about how Franklin died. Jack moved closer. She was protecting you. By lying to me for 50 years, Marcus turned. His eyes were wet. I built my whole life on a foundation of bullshit. Everything I thought I knew about my family. Was what your mother needed you to believe to keep you safe, Jack finished. She made a choice. Same choice my father made. Family over truth. And look where that got us. Your mother in a hospital. My men hurting an innocent woman. 50 years of lies and secrets and... Marcus stopped, collected himself. What do we do now? Jack had been thinking about that question since the moment he found his father's letter. He looked at the computer screen, at the evidence, at the names of men long dead and the crimes they'd committed. We finish what Franklin started, Jack said. We make sure the truth comes out. Even though most of these men are dead, even though prosecution is impossible. Because their victims deserve to know. Because history deserves to be accurate. Because, Jack paused, because that's what Franklin would have wanted. And what my father wished he'd been brave enough to do. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, if we release this, my grandfather's name gets destroyed. Everything the Webb family built was built on blood money and murder, Jack said gently. I'm sorry. I know that's harsh, but it's true. I know. Marcus wiped his eyes. Christ, I know. I thought I was looking for answers. I didn't realize the answers would hurt this much. Jack understood that. Understood it perfectly. The truth was supposed to set you free, but first it had to break you open. There's something else, Jack said. He scrolled to the end of the document. Look, another handwritten note. Franklin's writing, dated the day before he died. If anything happens to me, Linda is innocent. Our child is innocent. They deserve protection. They deserve a future. Don't let my investigation destroy them. Richard, if you're reading this, take care of my family. Please. Marcus read it, then read it again. Tears running freely now. He knew, Marcus whispered. He knew they were going to kill him, and he was still thinking about my mother, about me. That's who Franklin Morrison was. Marcus turned to Jack. I never knew him. Never got to meet my own father, but reading this, seeing what he cared about, he stopped. Started again. I want to be like him. I want to finish what he started. The right way. What does that mean? Marcus took a breath. It means we release the evidence. All of it. We give it to the FBI, to historians, to anyone who can use it to tell the truth about what happened in 1972. We don't hide the names. We don't protect anyone. Not my grandfather. Not anyone. That's going to come back on you, Jack warned. Your business, your reputation. People will connect you to the Webb family. They'll ask questions. Let them ask. I'll tell them the truth. That James Webb was my grandfather. That he was corrupt. That he had my father murdered. and that I'm doing what Franklin Morrison would have done if he'd lived. Marcus's voice was steady now, certain. I'm choosing truth over legacy. Jack felt something in his chest loosen. Relief, maybe, or recognition. Here was another man making the hard choice, the brave choice, the one that cost something. Okay, Jack said, then we do it together. We contact the FBI. We turn over the evidence. We make sure Franklin's story gets told right. Marcus nodded, then extended his hand. Jack looked at this man who was family, but also a stranger, who had hurt Jack's mother, but was also trying to make it right, who was choosing the harder path because it was the right one. Jack took his hand. They shook. Not just an agreement, a bond, family recognizing family. There's one more thing, Marcus said. Your mother. I want to apologize to her, in person. I know it won't fix what happened, but she deserves to hear it from me. Jack considered. His mother was still fragile, still healing. An apology from the man who'd ordered the robbery might upset her, or it might give her closure. I'll ask her, Jack said. If she's willing to see you, I'll arrange it. Thank you. They spent the next hour copying the evidence, creating backups, digital files, physical printouts, everything organized and documented. Jack called Wyatt, filled him in on what had happened. Wyatt listened, asked a few pointed questions, then said he'd contact a federal agent he knew. Someone trustworthy, someone who would handle this right. By 10 a.m., they had a plan. By noon, they'd have the evidence in the right hands. By evening, the story Franklin Morrison died trying to tell would finally be heard. Jack drove to the hospital. Marcus followed in his Mercedes. They rode the elevator up together, walked the hallway side by side. At the door to Martha's room, Jack stopped. Let me talk to her first, alone. Marcus waited outside. Jack entered. His mother was awake, sitting up slightly, eating lunch from a tray with the grim determination of someone who knew they needed strength to heal. She saw Jack and smiled. There's my boy. Hi, Mom. He kissed her forehead, sat down. How are you feeling? Like I got pushed by a truck, but the doctor says I'm healing well. She set down her fork. You look tired. Long night, long morning. Jack took her hand. Mom, I need to tell you something. About the locket. About what I found. He told her everything. About the microfilm. About Marcus Webb being Franklin's son. About the decision to release the evidence. About justice finally coming 50 years late, but still coming. Martha listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Franklin has a son, she said finally. All these years, and we had family we didn't know about. He's here, outside. He wants to apologize to you for what happened. You don't have to see him if you don't want to. Martha looked at Jack. Really looked at him. What do you think I should do? Jack thought about his promise, about not losing himself, about choosing mercy over revenge. I think, he said carefully, that Franklin would want his son to know his family, and I think you'd regret it if you didn't at least meet him. Martha smiled. You've grown wise, Jack Morrison. I had a good teacher. She squeezed his hand. Bring him in. Jack opened the door, gestured to Marcus. She'll see you. Marcus entered like a man approaching an altar, nervous, reverent, carrying the weight of what his actions, however unintentionally, had caused. He stood at the foot of Martha's bed, opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Mrs. Morrison, I don't have words. What happened to you was my fault. I hired those men. I told them to take your purse. I thought... He stopped, started over. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I am. I'm truly, deeply sorry. Martha studied him. Jack could see her taking in the details, the resemblance to Franklin in the shape of his eyes, the set of his jaw, the family visible in the bones. You're Franklin's boy, she said softly. Yes, ma'am. You look like him, around the eyes. Marcus's throat worked. I never knew him. My mother, she kept us apart to protect me. I didn't know who my real father was until 6 months ago. But you know now. Yes, ma'am. Martha was quiet. Then, sit down, Marcus. You're family. Family doesn't stand at the foot of the bed like a stranger. Marcus sat. Jack could see him trying not to cry. Franklin Morrison, Martha said, was the best man I ever knew besides my Richard. He was brave. He was kind. He loved your mother more than life itself. I'm learning that. And you're choosing to finish what he started, to release the evidence, even though it will hurt your family's name. Yes. Martha reached out, took Marcus's hand. Then you're his son in more than blood. You're his son in spirit. Marcus broke then, tears running down his face. I'm so sorry for what happened, for everything. I know you are. Martha's voice was gentle, and I forgive you, because that's what Franklin would do. That's what family does. Jack watched this moment, this grace, this woman who had every right to be angry to demand justice to punish, instead offering forgiveness. This was strength, real strength, the kind that didn't come from fists or fear, but from something deeper, something his mother had tried to teach him his whole life. They talked for another hour, Martha telling Marcus about Franklin, about the man his father had been, about the legacy he'd left behind, about how proud Franklin would be to see his son choosing truth over convenience. Marcus, soaking it all in, learning his father through the eyes of family who'd loved him. When visiting hours ended, Marcus stood. Thank you, Mrs. Morrison, for seeing me, for forgiving me my father back. You call me Aunt Martha from now on, she said firmly. We're family, and family takes care of each other. Marcus nodded, couldn't speak, just nodded. Jack walked him to the elevator. They stood in the hallway, two men who'd started the day as enemies and ended it as family. Thank you, Marcus said, for everything, for not being what you could have been. Iron Wolf, you mean? Yeah, Jack smiled, tired but genuine. I made a promise to my mother that I wouldn't lose myself. Turns out keeping that promise was the hardest fight I've ever had. But you kept it. Yeah, I did. The elevator arrived. Marcus stepped in, turned. Jack, I'd like to know you, if that's okay. Get to know my family. I'd like that too. The doors closed. Marcus disappeared downward. Jack stood alone in the hospital hallway, felt the weight of the day settling onto his shoulders. The relief, the exhaustion, the sense that something old had finally been laid to rest. His phone buzzed. Text from Wyatt. FBI agent confirmed for 3 p.m. My garage. Bring everything. Jack typed back, on my way. He returned to Martha's room. She was already asleep, the conversation having drained what energy she had. But there was peace in her face. The tension he'd seen since the robbery finally gone. Jack kissed her forehead, whispered, I kept my promise, Mom. Then he left. Rode his Harley through Phoenix in the afternoon heat. Met Wyatt and the FBI agent, a woman named Sarah Morrison, no relation, who listened to the whole story without interrupting and left with copies of everything. This will take time to process, she said, but I promise you the truth will come out. Franklin Morrison will get the recognition he deserves. By evening it was done. The evidence transferred. The story begun. 52 years of secrets finally ending. Jack went home. His small apartment above the garage, climbed the stairs with legs that felt like lead, sat on his bed and just existed for a while. His phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Morrison, this is Cody Blake. Jack tensed. What do you want? I did what you said. I turned myself in, told the police everything. They arrested me. I'm out on bail now, but Cody's voice cracked. I went to the hospital to apologize to your mother. She was asleep, but I left a letter. I just wanted you to know. Jack didn't know what to say. I'm going to plead guilty, Cody continued. Take responsibility. Do the time. Whatever happens, I deserve it. But I wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to do the right thing. Don't thank me. Thank my mother. She's the one who taught me mercy. I will, when she wakes up. I'll keep visiting until she'll see me. Pause. I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison, for all of it. I know. The call ended. Jack sat there in the gathering dark, thought about all the ways this could have gone, all the violence that could have happened, all the pain that could have been inflicted, but wasn't, because his mother had taught him a different way, because he'd made a promise and kept it, because sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing were the same thing. He took off the leather jacket, the Hells Angels patch, looked at it for a long moment. Then he hung it in the closet, not thrown away, not destroyed, just put away. A part of his past he'd needed to visit, but didn't need to live in. Jack Morrison went to sleep that night as Jack Morrison, not Iron Wolf, just a man who'd faced his demons and chosen to be better than them. 3 weeks later, the story broke. Major newspapers, national news, the 1972 Arizona weapons smuggling ring, the corruption, the cover-up, the murder of Franklin Morrison, all of it exposed, all of it documented, all of it true. Franklin Morrison was recognized posthumously, hero, whistleblower, a man who died trying to do right. Colonel James Webb's name was destroyed, his legacy dismantled, the truth ugly and undeniable. Marcus Webb gave interviews, told his story, about discovering his father's identity, about choosing truth over legacy, about finishing what Franklin started. Some people called him a traitor to his family. Others called him brave. Jack watched from a distance, proud of this cousin he'd never known, this family he'd found in the most unlikely place. Martha came home from the hospital after 6 weeks. Jack had converted his garage's back room into a temporary bedroom on the ground floor. She couldn't manage stairs yet, but she was healing, getting stronger every day. They had dinner together every night, talked about everything and nothing, about Franklin, about Richard, about the past finally being laid to rest. One evening, Martha said, "You know what I'm proudest of?" "What, Mom?" "That you kept your promise, that you could have become Iron Wolf again. I saw it in your eyes that first day, but you chose not to. You chose to be the man I raised you to be." Jack took her hand. "I had good teachers. Your father would be proud." "I hope so." They sat in comfortable silence, mother and son, survivors of a story that spanned 50 years and 3 generations. Outside, Phoenix glowed in the twilight. The desert wind whispered through the streets. And somewhere out there, Marcus Webb was learning to live with truth instead of lies. Jack Morrison thought about legacy, about the choices that define us, about the difference between strength and violence, between justice and revenge, between who we were and who we choose to become. He thought about promises kept and debts paid, about family found and family honored, about his Uncle Franklin, who he'd never met, but who had shaped his life nonetheless. And he thought about his father, Richard Morrison, who had carried shame for 50 years, but had raised a son strong enough to finish what he couldn't. The past was finally at peace, and Jack Morrison, at 67 years old, was finally free. 1 month after the story broke, Jack received a package. No return address, inside a photograph. Franklin Morrison in his Marine uniform. Young, strong, smiling with the confidence of a man who believed in justice and honor and doing right. On the back handwriting, Jack recognized as Marcus's for Uncle Jack. "Family remembers, family honors, family endures. Thank you for giving me my father. Marcus." Jack placed the photograph on his workbench, right where he could see it every day, a reminder of the legacy he'd inherited and the promise he'd kept. He went back to work, fixing engines, building things instead of breaking them, living quietly and honestly in a city that had seen him at his worst and his best. And every Tuesday and Friday evening, he visited his mother. They'd have dinner, they'd talk, they'd remember. And sometimes when the conversation lulled and the night settled in, Martha would touch the locket around her neck, returned to her by Jack, the microfilm removed, but the photograph still inside, and she would smile. "We did right by Franklin," she'd say, and Jack would nod. "Yeah, Mom, we did." The story of Iron Wolf was over. The story of Jack Morrison's son, nephew, cousin mechanic, and a man who'd learned that true courage wasn't about how hard you could hit, but about knowing when not to, that story continued, one honest day at a time.